Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. A very good afternoon to all of you. I welcome you all to the next class of this ongoing knowledge series. In this class today, we will be discussing about the CAG, that is the Comptroller and the Auditor General of India. One of the most important constitutional authorities that we have in the country. So much so, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar also said that this particular authority, this particular constitutional body is by far the most significant if we have to ensure the proper working of our country, if we have to ensure the proper working of our democracy. In this class today, we will be discussing about how does the appointment of the CAG takes place, what are the functions that the CAG of India performs, what are the issues related to it, and the other controversy related to the CAG. Now, before we begin, just a very quick background about the CAG. Just like many other bodies and many other parts of our constitution, we have actually borrowed the office of the CAG from UK. So the British also have a CAG. However, there is a very significant difference between the CAG that is in the UK and the CAG that is in India. If you actually look at the CAG, it gives you two functions, that is Comptroller and the Auditor General. Now, if you look at it carefully, there are two different functions. Comptroller means a person who controls the government exchequer, without whose permission the government cannot spend any money. Auditor, on the other hand, is a person who will audit the accounts of the government. In UK, the CAG has both these functions. That is, in UK, the CAG controls the government finances. In other words, the British government cannot spend any money without the CAG's permission. In UK, they require the CAG's permission even before spending any money. On the other hand, in India, that is not the case. In India, the role of the CAG begins only and only when the government of India has already spent the money, or the government authorities have already spent the money. So in India, although we have taken the complete name Comptroller and Auditor General, but we have only given the powers of auditor and not comptroller. In simple terms, the CAG in India cannot stop the government from spending money. They can give reports later on about how the money was spent, was it legal, illegal, if there are some discrepancies, etc. But the CAG in no way can stop the government of India from making these expenses, which is the case in UK, because in UK, the CAG also has a role of the comptroller. Now, the CAG, being a constitutional office, has provisions mentioned from Article 148 to Article 151. Because it is such an important body, it audits the account books of the government of India and the government of the states. At the end of the day, for any successful country, for any prosperous country, it is essential that the government is accountable for how and where are they spending the public money. At the end of the day, the government is working with your money, with my money, with our money. We are the ones who are paying the taxes. Thus, we have the right to know where exactly is the money being used. If the government, for example, asks 500 crore rupees in the parliament, says that we want it for a certain welfare scheme, we have the right to know whether or not that money was used for that scheme or was it used somewhere else. That is essentially the job of the CAG. It audits the accounts of the government departments. It checks whether or not the money that was intended to be used for a specific purpose was actually used for it or not. Because it is such an important office, there are certain provisions which are given in the constitution to ensure that the CAG has adequate independence in its working. For example, the removal of the CAG is extremely difficult. The removal process of the CAG is the same as is followed in case of the Supreme Court judge. Meaning that you need to have special majority in both the houses of the parliament, which is very difficult to achieve. Then, the salary of the CAG, like many other constitutional positions, cannot be reduced to his or her disadvantage during his or her tenure. Not just this, the CAG is not eligible for further reappointment. Meaning that once the tenure of the CAG is over, the 6-year tenure, after that, the CAG will not get to have reappointment. Means the CAG cannot favor the government hoping that I will be reappointed again, because that is not allowed. Salary is a charged expenditure on the Consolidated Fund of India, so it is not votable by the Parliament. The CAG can work independently of any government interference, and the conditions of service of people working in IAAS. IAAS means Indian Audit and Account Service. This is one of the central government services that you get through the UPSC Civil Services examination. The people who work in this service are the ones who usually work under the CAG. The service conditions of personnel in this service also are prescribed by the President only after consultation with the CAG. All these provisions are made to ensure that the person working in the office of the CAG has adequate independence and does not have to be dependent on the government for his or her working. There are some other conditions of service that you have to keep in mind. For example, the conditions of the service of the CAG are mentioned in the CAG Act of 1971. The tenure of the CAG, as you mentioned, is 6 years and the retirement age is 65, while the salary that the CAG gets is the same as a Supreme Court judge. These are very common details that I'm sure all of you would be aware of anyway. Now coming to the functions part of the CAG. The CAG has a lot of functions to perform, and that is why it is also considered as one of the most busiest bodies of the government. In fact, recently there was an interview in the newspaper where the CAG, the ex-CAG, was saying that the work of the CAG is so difficult because they have to prepare hundreds of reports every single year. And when they ask a specific government department to give them a copy of a bill or give them a copy of an invoice of where they have spent the money, it is delayed so much that the CAG has no option but to just edit it out and move forward, because they have to audit so many accounts, so many reports. So CAG mainly audits and reports all the expenditures from the consolidated fund, public account fund, and the contingency fund of both center and the state governments and the union territories. So there is no parallel office in the state government level. The CAG of India does the same function for the union government as it does for the state governments. When it makes the reports with respect to the union governments, that report is submitted to the President. When the report is with respect to the state governments, that report goes to the governor of the respective states. The CAG also audits and reports on all trading, manufacturing, profit and loss accounts which are kept by any department of the union and the states. Now just imagine the kind of work that the CAG would have to do. He would also audit the stocks and stores of the governments. Now please do understand, although CAG is one single person, that doesn't mean that he is alone working all these things. There are thousands and thousands of people who actually work under the CAG. The institution of the CAG is headed by one single person, but there are a lot of people who are working under the CAG. The CAG also has a responsibility to audit organizations which are substantially financed by the government and other institutions which are not substantially financed, but if a request is made for that by the President or by the governor. So as you can see, there is a lot of scope of going to and fro here. There is no specific list that these are the 80, 100, 120 organizations which will be audited by the CAG. It can increase or decrease depending upon the pattern of those organizations and also depending upon the requests that are made by the President and by the governor. Not just this, the CAG also advises the format in which the union and the state governments have to maintain their account. The CAG also audits the public sector undertakings and government companies and provides a certificate of net proceeds to the Government of India, meaning that the CAG officially gives a certificate, says that okay, the Government of India has earned this much money. These are the proceeds that the Government of India has got in one single year, and that is considered as the official proceeds of the government. That is how significant the office of the CAG is. The functions don't end here. The CAG also holds a finance commission, which is another constitutional body, in acquiring and getting an informed opinion on the state government's finances. Because as you know, the finance commission has to recommend to the union government how much money should they distribute from their tax bracket to the state governments. For that, the finance commission needs to know the individual health of each and every state. How much money do they have? How much money do they expect to earn, etc., etc. Also, the CAG acts as a guide, friend and philosopher to the Public Account Committee. Now, in simple terms, the procedure is CAG, after preparation of the report, gives the report to the President. The President then lays the report in the Parliament. In the Parliament, it is the Public Account Committee that actually discusses the report or that actually analyzes the report. As you know, the Public Account Committee has 22 members, 15 from the Lok Sabha and 7 members from the Rajya Sabha. The CAG also submits 3 account reports to the President: the account report on appropriation account, the audit report on appropriation account, the audit report on the finance account, and the audit report on the public undertakings. These are the 3 different reports submitted by the CAG to the President of India each year, and each of these reports then are laid by the President in the Parliament. As I said, these reports go to the Houses of the Parliament, after which these are discussed mainly by the Public Account Committee and by the other members of the Parliament. Having said that, the CAG, as we discussed, is one of the most significant bodies in the Indian Constitution. The reason being, it is the certificate of the CAG that actually tells us if the government is accounting for each and every penny or not. If you look at the past few years, some of the biggest scams that have made the news were based on the CAG reports. Be it the 2G scam, be it the Commonwealth Games scam, the Adarsh scam, etc. All that were somewhere based on the findings of a CAG report. However, there are still a lot of loopholes in how the CAG operates. The biggest issue with the CAG right now is the appointment. Now, the CAG of India is appointed by the President of India on the advice and recommendations of the Council of Ministers. Now, the issue here is that CAG is such an important office that it is advised that there should at least be a proper committee that should be formed, having experts from different fields, having representation from outside the government also, who then should suggest to the President of India who shall be the next CAG. Because right now the accusation is that the party in power, whoever is ruling the government, usually appoints people who are close to them as the CAG so that their own doings should not be investigated. That is a major issue with respect to the CAG. And this is not a new issue, because it has always been the same ever since our independence. That is how the CAG is appointed. No government has taken efforts to make a committee to make the process more transparent, because at the end of the day, every government would want a favorable person to be in that position. And that is a major cause of concern. There are some other concerns as well. If you remember, from 2004 to 2014, when we had the UPA government led by Dr. Manmohan Singh, especially in the second tenure of the government from 2009 to 2014, a lot of CAG reports came out pointing out towards big scams. The 2G scam, the Commonwealth Games scam, etc. And these were huge losses that the CAG was predicting. So much so that it became a kind of a convention throughout the country to say that the government of that time was a corrupt government. Even the election of 2014 were fought on that basis. And even today, when people talk about the previous government, they say that was a corrupt government. Why? Because of the CAG reports. However, the reality is that in most of those cases, no crime was proven. In most of those cases, no one got the punishment. So the question is, when the CAG gives a report and says that a loss of 10,000 crore, 50,000 crore, 1 lakh crore has happened, and when it has not been proved by the court later on, who is responsible for the image damage that has happened? Who is responsible for circulating this message that yes, such a loss happened, but it could not be proved it could not be proved like that in the court? That is also a question, because there is no justification that is required from the side of the CAG as per the law right now. Now, the CAG undertakes different types of audits. First, compliance audit. The compliance audit is the easiest to understand. That is, the compliance audit, in this, the CAG actually sees whether or not the money was spent for the right purpose or not. Let's take an example. Let's say that the government of India in the parliament said that we want 5,000 crore rupees for the Manrega scheme. The CAG will then check whether or not this money was spent on Manrega only or whether it was spent on something else. Whether or not the government complied with the request or not. This is called compliance audit. Next type of audit is financial audit. Let's say the government complied well. They spent all the money on the correct purposes, but whether or not the proper record of those transactions are kept or not. Are these records kept in such a manner so as it should create a confusion in the minds of the people? Are they trying to hide something or not? So are the reports kept in the correct order, in the manner prescribed by the CAG or not? That is called financial audit performed by the CAG. The next kind of audit that the CAG does is efficiency audit. Means, let's assume the government of India asked for 600 crore rupees to build a statue. They said that we want to build a statue, and now what happened was the CAG says that okay, 600 crore rupees was taken, statue was built, but the same thing could have been done with 300 crores only. That is, the government did not utilize the fund properly. The government employed many more people than required. The government did not really negotiate well with the people who were given the contract. So all that combined means that the efficiency of the project has been compromised. That is the efficiency auditing of the CAG. Now this is not a crime. For example, if I go to the market to buy a mobile phone, which is usually for 20,000, but someone said at the shopping mall, I'm selling it for 40,000. I said, okay, I'll take it. That is not a crime that I commit. A crime would be when there is certain financial fudging of numbers. But this is a waste of the public money. That is what the CAG points towards. Then we have one more type of audit called the proprietary audit. Now, the proprietary audit is the one which is also a major cause of debate and discussion with respect to the CAG. In the proprietary audit, the CAG actually says, or CAG has to decide whether or not the government needed to spend that money or not. Let's take the previous example. Let's say the government of India took 500 crore rupees to build a statue, and they did spend that money to build the statue. All that is fine, nothing is illegal. But the CAG in the report will also identify whether or not there was a need to build that statue, whether or not the same money could have been used somewhere else, whether or not the government just splurged the money when they did not need it. That is called proprietary audit. Now this is also a cause of concern. Why? At the end of the day, we are a democracy, meaning that the power to take decisions, which also includes the power to decide how the public money will be used, is with the elected government of the day. Doesn't matter how powerful the CAG is, at the end of the day, the CAG is not an elected official. The CAG is appointed, but the people have not elected him. So as per democracy, the elected representatives, that is the government, has a freedom to spend the money because they have been voted in power by the people. So the question of proprietary audit actually rises at how can the CAG decide what is needed and what is not needed. It is the government at the end of the day who will decide whether or not some money has to be spent or not. That is also a major cause of concern. These are all the things that you needed to know about the CAG. Before I take your questions, a very quick clarification. Yesterday, we took a class on the sources of the Indian Constitution, where we discussed about what are the different features of the Indian Constitution that were taken from various constitutions across the world. One of the points that I discussed in that class was that the procedure established by law has been taken from British Constitution. Now, there were a lot of comments over whether it is taken from the British Constitution or Japanese Constitution. That is procedure established by law. Now, let me quickly clarify here. The fact is that this doctrine of procedure established by law actually was invented in Britain only. So Britain was the first country in the entire world to start the concept of procedure established by law. However, in our case, we took this phrase from the Japanese Constitution. So if the question is from which country did we borrow it, it would be the Japanese Constitution. On the other hand, if the question is regarding from where did this entire idea originate first, that was the British Constitution. So that's a clarification with respect to yesterday's comments that we had on the sources of the Indian Constitution. Now let's quickly jump to the questions that you have for this session. One question that I have is difference between CAG and SG. I am assuming by SG you mean Solicitor General. If that is the case, then they are entirely different. Solicitor General is kind of, I won't say assistant, but it is kind of a deputy to the Attorney General. So if you would have confusion between Attorney General and the Solicitor General, that might have been the case. Attorney General is the highest law officer of the country, kind of a lawyer for the government. Solicitor General also fights cases on behalf of the government. CAG does not fight any case. CAG just does financial auditing of the government accounts. Okay. Then I have a question, Consolidated Fund of States and India and Contingency Fund of States and India also audited? Yes, they are also audited. Then I have a question, who is the chairman of CAG? See, there is one CAG only, there is no chairman of CAG. There is just one CAG of India, and then there are a lot of people who work under the CAG, most of whom are from the IAAS service, that is the Indian Audit and Account Service. So there is no position like the chairman of the CAG. There is just the CAG, Comptroller and Auditor General. Okay. Then I have a question, in which House of Parliament the CAG's report is laid by the President. So basically what happens is, usually it's not that the President of India will decide in the two houses. The President of India will give the report to the Public Account Committee, and the Public Account Committee, as you know, has members from both the houses, so they discuss it. These kind of committees like Public Account Committee usually has representation from almost all the political parties, so that is how they discuss it. Does the tenure of CAG increase, decrease by behavior, any other issue? No. The removal of the CAG will be done in only the same manner as a Supreme Court judge. For changing the tenure, you would require the constitutional amendment because it is mentioned in the Constitution. Okay. Then, okay, I have, okay, yeah, I think these were most of the questions that I had with respect to the CAG, the Comptroller and the Auditor General. I hope most of these were clarifications that would help you in future. From whatever we have studied, you would be able to answer most of the questions with respect to the CAG. Just one more fact very quickly before we end this. Now, when the CAG submits the report, and let's say in the report the CAG says that yes, there is a scam or something wrong has happened, and they submit the report to the President. That does not mean that automatically the person who is accused in the report will be punished or the person will be arrested. No. It is then the responsibility of the government whether or not they want to take it forward or investigate the matter. The CAG does not investigate the matter. Remember this. The CAG does not go to the court to justify. The CAG has only given the report, and then if the government thinks that yes, there is a need to have further investigation, then they will involve their own agencies to involve or to take this matter further. The one other thing that I had said in the beginning, the problem with the CAG is that it is quite overloaded with the number of reports that it has to do and the audits that it has to take. Because of which, a lot of times when they ask the government department for certain papers, etc., there is a lot of delay, which does not help the CAG in working. A lot of times it is also said it is an intentional delay by the government, and the government does not really give a lot of detailed data. Like recently there was an article in the newspaper. Former CAG said that whenever we ask the government department how much money did you spend on various things, they just say on miscellaneous we spend 100 crore rupees. Now they don't give the detail of what is miscellaneous, what is included, so on and so forth. The other issue with the CAG is that they have certain restrictions. For example, when they ask for reports or they can't ask for details of the expenditure from the intelligence agencies, from the Secret Service. So if the Secret Service tell the CAG we have spent 500 crore rupees, the CAG has to accept that, full stop. They can't ask for any more details. That is how the office of the CAG works, and these are some of the issues with respect to the CAG, and these are all the things that you need to know to answer all these questions with respect to the CAG. Okay. One more question that I have is, CAG able to propose investigation at the state level? See, understand, the CAG does not propose any investigation. CAG will just submit the report. In the report, they will say that there is a mismatch between the money earned and money spent, full stop. Then the government, if they want to investigate, they can. If they don't, then the CAG will not do anything. The CAG does give these kind of reports at the state level also, at the center level also. It then depends on the government of the day at the state or the center level if they want to take it further. But the CAG does not propose any investigation. They just give the report, and the central government or the state government will take that up. Okay, perfect. This brings us to the end of this session. I really hope it was helpful. Do join us tomorrow as well, because this series will continue with 2 live classes every single day, 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. Make sure you do hit the subscribe button, press the bell icon to get notified whenever the new video goes live. Thank you so much for watching.